Trump made historic gains among Latino voters this election. How historic? Well, exit polls show 46% of the voting bloc supported him. That is a record high for the Republican Party. That's compared to 32% in 2020 and 29% in 2016. If we drill down even further, the gains were actually made with Hispanic men. 55% of Latino men voted for Trump. Now, some analysts say the shift is linked to dissatisfaction with the economy, but we're going to break it down even further. So here to help us do that is MSNBC contributor and Hillary Clinton's former deputy director of Hispanic media, Paola Ramos. She is the author of one of the best books out there. It's entitled Defectors. Also here is a lovely lady, Indivisible managing director, Mari Urbina. Pal, people need to get Paola Ramos's book, okay? Like, we're not here to sell everybody's book, but we're gonna sell Paola Ramos's book, and let me tell y'all why. Because we had Pal on the show when your book came out, but this, for people who are like, how could this happen? What is going on? Why are people voting? Why are Latinos voting for Donald Trump? Right? Because that's what people are saying. Pal, in your book, you have gone across the country in some of these key spaces and places and talked to conservative Hispanic voters about just what they're thinking, their shifts. And I just think you are the person to help shed light for people on this moment.
No, thank you, Simone. Look, I think I do still always want to be clear. I think we're all trying to figure out exactly the way that this story is evolving. Let's start by saying the facts. It is true that the vice president did win a majority of Latino voters. We have to start there. But I think what I was seeing the last 4 years is the fact that this road towards Trumpism, even for ordinary Democratic Latinos, even for independent Latinos, the road from their homes to Trumpism actually wasn't that complicated. Right. And I think that's because what I was noticing on the road was that these sort of anti-immigrant sentiments and that rhetoric started to come up in conversations in very subtle ways. The transphobia, right? I also started to hear that also in many subtle ways. The anti-blackness, particularly during the 2022 midterms, when Republicans really, really sort of had that criminal fear-mongering narrative that also, I heard that so much in places like the Bronx or the Rio Grande Valley, even in California, is I think what we saw now very clearly is that Trumpism was able to tap into something that maybe is very hard to talk about, but that is the racial and ethnic grievances that I feel we do hold very deeply among us. He was able to tap into a form of traditionalism that I think has really shaped our moral compass as Latinos. And they were able to tap into a lot of the political traumas that we talk a lot about in this show, the communism. And I think all of that put together simply tells us a very simple story, and that is that Latinos are very complicated human beings, and we carry very complicated histories and a very complicated weight of colonialism, and now we're seeing that exposed. And now it's our job to simply try and understand, to see the problems in order to move forward.
So, Mari, you take that complexity, you add to the fact that it's also a very dynamic electorate. You have about 30% of Latinos who would have been eligible to vote in this election who couldn't vote in 2008. You have people becoming 18, eligible to vote constantly. I think the other reason that people were very taken by this story is it wasn't just Cubans in Miami-Dade. It was Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania. It was Mexican Americans all along some of those U.S.-Mexico border states. How do you tease out what has always been there and what is specific and unique to this election?
So two things that stand out for me, Alicia, is one, Latinos are fitting into a much broader context. I think when you look at the 7-point nationwide shift across 90% of counties, that's not just a Latino story. That is a broader electorate that's pissed, that wants lower prices, and that saw Kamala Harris as a status quo. And she couldn't get away from Joe Biden. So I do also think that part of what I think about when I'm contextualizing this election is also that political reality and that terrain. That's going to change the second that Donald Trump gets into office. They will then be on the defense, is one. And then the second thing is, when you look at the performance of Democrats down ballot in Nevada, in Arizona, places that have a much larger share of the Latino electorate, you still saw Democrats hold on in the Senate. You saw Jackie Rosen hold on. You saw Ruben Gallego hold on. And so I also I think that's the other part of texture that I'd add is that, yes, it is a young electorate. It is a dynamic electorate. And I don't believe Latinos voted for Project 2025. I believe they voted for lower prices.
So, Paola, that raises a lot of interesting little vignettes for me around this this transition and how particularly those in the Latino community see themselves as both immigrants and Americans at the same time. So you have a very interesting conversation that David Noriega had with the Alvarez family. I'd like to play a little bit of that, and we can chat about it on the other side.
And I noticed that he was not scared to say what he felt, regardless of what people would say, and I think I respect that about him.
When you hear Trump promise mass deportations, do you worry about them?
Yes and no, because the ones that I know, they're doing good. They're not breaking any laws.
I believe he's going to start deporting all the bad people.
The rest of that was in all the criminals, and so you have this interesting view that, and it should be noted that they're members of the Alvarez family who are here illegally, and so they would be first and foremost on the list. You know, being here illegally is a crime. So if Donald Trump is going after the criminals, he therefore is coming after you for having committed a crime. What is it about that connection that it's not me, it's those others? That other thing is now seemed to be a very salient conversation within the Hispanic community.
Definitely. I think what we learned is that a lot of Latinos resonated with that us versus them language and game that Donald Trump played, right? I think the reality is, and I think that's what the polls were showing, right, that there was a significant amount of Latinos that simply weren't resonating with that anti-immigrant message. No, they didn't really see themselves as part of that them language. They weren't insulted by that language. You can explain that by many different ways. One of them is simply the fact that a lot of Latinos are simply more Americanized now. They're more assimilated. The majority of us are now U.S. born. The majority of us speak English. We're under 50. And so that's one way to sort of understand that. Then I think there's the real elements of the very real disillusionments. I mean, I've even been in places like Nevada and Arizona. I've talked to dreamers. I've talked to undocumented immigrants that have been in this country for over 20 years. And there is a sense of resentment that the Democratic Party has yet to fulfill their promise, to really promise and give them that comprehensive immigration reform. And so in those conversations, you start to feel some resentment using the same language that Trumpism uses, which is they are cutting the line. They are coming in. They're stealing something from me. I think that also resonated. But I think now we're standing in the reality of all of these different mixed status families are now going to actually understand whether or not they feel welcomed in Donald Trump's America right now. Because when those mass deportations happen, and they will try and do that, it won't be a matter of who feels American enough or not. It'll be up to Trump to determine who looks American enough or not. Because what we learned from Operation Wetback is not only that they deported Mexicans, but that they also targeted people that were Mexican looking. And so this is now where, as a community, we're going to test ourselves and really, really understand how united we are. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes these difficult moments to get to that place.
Especially since the Supreme Court is now allowing racial profiling within a certain radius of the U.S.-Mexico border. Mari, if you are one of the people in the Democratic Party who's doing the autopsy when it comes to Latino voters, where do you start?
So just to double up on what Paula was saying there is, I think it's really fair to point at the long-term relationship decay with the Democratic Party. I think it's fair to talk about the credibility and question it and understand it. But what I'm trying to say is when you have an economic prism like you had with an electorate that is largely working class and is largely young and within their working years, their prism for how they're experiencing this election specifically will have a prevailing interest in their well-being, their material conditions, their wages, what things cost. So that is one thing where if Democrats want to shore up this community, they have to have credibility on fighting for the working class. That's one. And then secondly, I would say that, you know, I think all of us are learning that no community should be flattened, no community should be taken for granted, and every community is going to matter. And what I'll say is now that Republicans are going to be in the majority, you saw how hard of a time the House majority had in governing. They have even slimmer majorities going into this Congress. And so we have to make sure that we are distinguishing ourselves and that we are drawing contrast, because the agenda that they intend to put forward will be unpopular, and it's going to cause a lot of harm to a lot of the people who may have just voted them in.
Mari Urbina, Paula Ramos, thank you both so much for being with us, for having this conversation. There is much more to discuss straight ahead. Be sure to follow our show on